we're celebrating the 150th anniversary of the American Civil War. National Park Service all across the country is celebrating this. John Gelston Floyd Jr. was the great-grandson of William Floyd, the signer of the Declaration of Independence. He served in the Union Army. He served from 1862 to 1864. He was at the battles of Chancellorsville and Gettysburg. Three of the bloodiest battles of the Civil War were Chancellorsville, Gettysburg, and Chickamauga. He was at two of the three. He was on Culp's Hill at Gettysburg. Culp's Hill was the pivotal hill that the Confederates had to take to defeat the Union Army. Culp's Hill stood. John Gelston Floyd Jr. lived through that battle. During the American Civil War, over 600,000 people died during that battle. Mostly Americans, but there are other people of foreign nationalities who did fight in both armies. John Gelston Floyd lived here. He's buried here. He is in the cemetery. John Gelston Floyd, his second cousin, was his commander when he transferred from the 145th Infantry into an artillery division. And his cousin was killed at Chancellorsville. And John Gelston Floyd Jr. had to make arrangements for his cousin's body to be removed and taken from bombing and taken back home. There were four signers of the Declaration of Independence from New York State. William Floyd was one of the signers. He was the youngest of the signers from New York State. They signed on August 2nd. Most people think it was signed on July 4th, but it wasn't. The building here, the Floyd Estate, or the old Mastic House that was known to the Floyds, is the only surviving home of one of the four signers of the Declaration of Independence from New York State. And over here, this is when John Gelston Floyd Jr. left service. He was in Tennessee, and most people don't know that Indians fought on both sides during the Civil War, primarily on the southern side. And these are clothes that would have been worn by Thomas's Legion, Cherokees and Mountaineers from eastern North Carolina and eastern Tennessee and western North Carolina. And Cherokee turban, moccasins, pipe tomahawk, and a knife and sheath, and they wore a combination of Confederate uniform and Indian clothes.
This entire display was put together in honor of the 150th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg. John Gelston Floyd fought at the Battle of Gettysburg. And so I have 75 items on display that have to do with the Civil War and this family. So you're going to see John Gelston's frock coat, his kepi, his sword that he had at Gettysburg with him, his vest, his infantry tactics, his morning report books, the inventory list of his unit. He was with the 145th New York Volunteer Regiment, and he signed up about 19 to 20 farm boys from the area of Brookhaven to go fight in his particular company with him. So they were engaged with the 12th Corps. That's what he was under, the 12th Corps under General Slocum. They saw very severe action in Chancellorsville, which the Union lost, and they saw heavy action on at least the third day of the three-day battle of Gettysburg, and of course Gettysburg, the North won. That was the high tide mark for the battle, for the war, for the entire Civil War. From then on, Lee was on the defensive. So there was no more invasions of the North, and they chased Lee all over the South. So the war continued on for about 2 more years. Had the Union forces engaged Lee after the Battle of Gettysburg, they probably could have ended the war at least a year early, but they let him go. The wounded train for the Confederate soldiers under Lee was 17 miles long. That's how many people were killed or wounded in the Battle of Gettysburg. Both sides combined, over 50,000 men were killed, wounded, or missing in the Battle of Gettysburg. 28,000 Confederates and about 22 to 23,000 Union soldiers. So the fact that John Gelston survived Gettysburg and Chancellorsville two months before is a feat in itself. 1 out of 5 men were killed, 1 out of 4 were wounded. So this fellow walked away. Maybe he had nightmares for the rest of his life. His daughter said he did, from the Civil War, from the battlefields. You can't imagine how bad it was seeing 50,000 people spread all over a battlefield, dead, wounded, maimed. The bullets that they used were mini balls, and a mini ball is heavy lead, and it would shatter your bones. And that's why there were so many amputees during the Civil War. They had to take off many limbs of many soldiers. We have newspapers from the war, an original Emancipation Proclamation from a New York paper that the family kept. It's right there. Can't tell you what paper it was from. It was just cut out, but that was issued in a New York paper. That's January 1st, at least 1863. You have his sword, the belt that held the sword, his little mess kit, a picture of him in his frock coat. You have his cartridge container and his little writing kit that he wrote these letters home with. Now, this is the letter. All of these are priceless, but this was written on the battlefield of Gettysburg, July 4th, 1863, 150 years to the day. And let me make the translation for you. Since it was on the battlefield, he did it in pencil. It's very hard to read. So this is the translation. He was a good boy. He wrote home to his mother once a week throughout the whole war. Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, July 4th, 1863, 8 a.m. Dear Mother, there has been tremendous fighting for 3 days, and we have beaten the enemy, or at least they have not beaten us, and they tried it very hard. The battery was engaged yesterday. Our loss was only 1 wounded. Everything is quiet this morning. I knew we took about 2,500 prisoners yesterday, many of them wounded. I am safe and well and must again thank God for my preservation. At one time yesterday we were under a tremendous fire of shot and shells. I suppose we shall yet have some hard fighting during the next fortnight. We have lost some 5 officers and many good men. I will write you more at length as soon as I have the chance. Your loving son. That's that letter. All of these others are very human letters. He's writing home to his mom, thanking her for the box of goodies she sent. He's writing home, thanking her for the caps that she knit for all the soldiers in his regiment. So the ladies at home were sewing things, packing up food, sending them, and the boys were getting them. There's other letters here where he's describing the death of his close cousin, William Crosby, who was killed at the Battle of Chancellorsville, right next to him. These are letters home to his brother-in-law about losing Crosby, his cousin, and since we lost Chancellorsville, the body was left on the field. They couldn't retrieve it, so under a truce, about a week later, the rebels allowed the Union to come in and take their dead back. So he takes the remains of his cousin, Crosby, and brings it all the way home to New York. That's in all these letters. These letters will make you cry. They're very human letters. We have photographs of his cousins that were killed and some of his other cousins that survived. And sometimes they didn't know one another was fighting on the field. They didn't know they were connected. And after the war, then they all realized they were all together in specific battles. So it's great history. And over here we have his lieutenant's commission, his captain's commission, an original recruitment poster from Senator Moriches. And here's a 1862 Civil War recruitment poster with John Gelston's name on the bottom of it. Over here we have a wonderful Springfield rifled musket. These were issued to our boys. This is not John Gelston's. This was a gun that was lent to me by Cynthia Parry from Senator Moriches. This is a Springfield rifle, and I just wanted everyone to see. She's lending it to me for this display. He was issued one, and it says it in the documents. All of the men in his unit were issued Springfield rifles. So this is an 1864 Springfield rifle. He was issued his in 1863, so this is maybe a little bit more advanced model. But it's an extremely heavy gun, and this would have fired a mini ball out of it. And mini ball is pure lead. It's big, it's heavy, and it's the type that would shatter bones, if not kill you outright. So that's the type gun that our Union boys were issued. So it says it right on the inventory list that they're all getting Springfield muskets. The South didn't have these. When the South won a battle, they would take the guns off of the dead, wounded soldiers from the North. So these were considered one of the best firearms for its time, and the South wanted them. So they would take them from officers and soldiers who were wounded or dead on the fields. Very accurate gun. And this sword, again, this doesn't have anything to do with our John Gelston, but this was the sword that fought at the Battle of Chickamauga, which the Union lost, and Hively was the name of the lieutenant that own this particular sword. Again, Miss Parry lent this to me, even though John Gelston wasn't at Chickamauga. I just wanted people to see some of these other priceless items from battles. So it's stamped on there, Chickamauga. And this fellow, his name is Francis Minot Weld. And John Gelston, here's John Gelston again in his frock coat. He didn't know Francis Minot Weld at the time, but his grandson marries his granddaughter. And that's why we have all these items from Francis Minot Weld. He was the surgeon of the 27th Colored Troops, U.S. Colored Troops. And have you all seen the movie Glory? Glory was Robert Shaw, 54th U.S. Colored Troops. They go down to South Carolina and they storm Fort Wagner, and they get decimated, and it was a loss. They didn't win it. Well, this fellow was in charge of the 27th U.S. Colored Troops, and they stormed Fort Fisher and Fort Buchanan. So if you know what it was like in that movie Glory, it was the same thing. So the men were decimated. They finally took the fort after the second try. This is the remnant of the Confederate flag from Fort Fisher. We never knew what this was until we finally matched it up with the letter. And here it is, right at the bottom paragraph. This is a piece of the flag of Fort Fisher. The white one comes from Fort Buchanan, which is where he was writing the letter from. We don't have the white one, we only have the red one. So the men eventually are connected through their grandchildren. But that's priceless, because once Fort Fisher fell, the South was cut off from the sea. It was the death knell to the South. They could no longer get in supplies from England or from France. So the only open port at that time was Wilmington, and Fort Fisher and Fort Buchanan guarded Wilmington. Now, to make another connection, Bob Shore was the fellow who commanded the 54th U.S. Colored Troops and who was killed at Fort Wagner. This fellow here, John Gelston's first cousin, killed at Chancellorsville, he was friends with Shaw, and we have it in documents. So he's killed, Shaw's killed. It's just, they're all connected. So he was fighting, John Gelston was fighting with him when he gets shot in the breast by a rebel sharpshooter. A musket ball took him. So this is the body that he retrieves and brings back to New York. Here's the memorial on Lieutenant Crosby. This is his other cousin, William Bacon, who was killed at Fredericksburg. This is Cornelius Du Bois, his other cousin, who fought at Gettysburg and was wounded severely on the wheat field. So all of these people are connected. These are his infantry buttons. These are his lieutenant bars, his captain's bars. That's a Confederate bullet from the Battle of Gettysburg. Right there. That's a Gardner. That's a .58 caliber Gardner.